Let me start sharing my screen. Please let me know once the screen is visible to you all. I hope my screen is visible, people.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So today let's start with how the workflow happens in not just Power BI, but any BI tool for that matter, or how the project flows in any business intelligence related project. Okay. So here, the first and foremost thing is to get the data from different data sources. So that is what it means. That is connect to data sources. Now, when I say data sources here, what we mean is the data which might be coming from some databases, that is RDBMS, like maybe SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle DB, IBM DB, and maybe some data might be coming from the CSV or flat files, Excel sheets, SharePoint folders, or sometimes the data might be even coming from directly the website. Okay, so this is what it is, connecting to different data sources. The next thing that is important is transform the data sources. Now, sometimes the data coming from the data sources might be raw data and unclean data and non-uniform data. And hence, we need some transformations to be performed on that data so that that data is ready for BI developing. Okay. And when we say transform data, the things that usually are involved here is, let's say, deleting or removing unwanted rows or columns, deleting null values or replacing some values, okay, creating more calculated columns, pivoting the data, unpivoting the data, and all the transformation steps. Okay, and this transformation step usually in Power BI happens in the dedicated ETL tool within Power BI, which is called as Power Query Editor. Let me repeat, the transformation of the data in Power BI happens in Power Query Editor, which is the dedicated ETL tool within Power BI. Now, here it is to be noted that in almost all the projects, usually what happens, I mean, I'm talking about the real-time industry. What happens there is for ETL, they don't use Power Query Editor, but they use some dedicated ETL tool and do the ETL there, that is extract, transform, and load. ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So they use the ETL tools like maybe Informatica or Azure Data Factory or Azure Synapse Data Lake or maybe even SQL Server or Snowflake. And what they do here is they clean the data there, they transform the data there, and they make the uniform, I mean, data uniform in those tools. And from there, they get the data directly into Power BI. Okay. However, if you are getting the data from those tools and still you find that some transformation is required for the data, then you can definitely accomplish the same in Power Query Editor as well, which is the dedicated ETL tool with limited capabilities, which is present within Power BI itself. Okay. So once we are through with transforming the data, the next step is modeling the data. Now, what is meant by modeling the data? Modeling the data means, let's say, creating facts and dimension tables separately, doing multi-dimensional modeling, and also establishing the relationship between the tables, also establishing the filter flow directions. Now, right now, you might be thinking that you are not aware of these concepts, but don't worry about that. Once we come to modeling of the data, we will explain everything, each and every detail, each and everything in very much detail, and not just theoretical part, but we will also look into practically how these things are performed in Power BI itself. Okay. And once that is done, once the data modeling is done, we create the calculated columns and one more calculated field, which is called as measures within Power BI. Okay, so it's like creating the new calculated fields that are required for data analysis. And this in Power BI is done by usage of one particular coding language called as DAX. Now the DAX stands for data analysis expressions. Okay. So once you have created those calculated fields and measures, the next thing that needs to be done is creating the actual reports. Okay. And when it is about creating actual reports and visualizations, you'll be creating, let's say, the graphs, the line charts, maybe the donut chart, the pie chart, tree map, or the map visualizations, heat map, scatter plot, different kinds of visualization based on the requirement from the business end. Okay. And yes, once this is done, you do the data validation. Data validation in the sense you check the data here with the data which is coming from the backend. Is the data showing up same here as well as here? And once the data validation is done, what you do is you ultimately publish your work, and you publish your work and share your work for collaboration with maybe others from your team. And you do that by publishing your data model or publishing your Power BI file in the cloud platform of Power BI called as Power BI Service. Okay, so this is how the workflow happens when you work within the BI tools. Is there any doubt with respect to this, people? Yes.
Hmm.
Okay. So moving forward, so in this course, we will start from here and we will actually end up here. Okay, we'll collect the data from data sources, then transform, then model the data, create calculated columns and measures, then we'll create the reports and visualizations, and ultimately we'll publish and share it in cloud platform called as Power BI Service. Okay, now the way this course works is we will use a particular data set in classroom and basically this online class, and we'll be using another data set in assignments as well. So basically, after each and every class, once we start the transformation of the data, I'll be providing you the class files which contains the classwork which I do and the data sources for the classwork which I do. And along with that, you'll be getting one more data set and assignment questions. So you need to perform uh, the uh, the tasks which are mentioned in the assignments based on the assignment data set which I provide. Okay. So ultimately, we'll end up after this course, we'll end up creating at least 2, 3 dashboards. Okay. So this is the basic agenda of this course. Okay, so let's come to the first thing, that is connect to data sources. Okay, so when you are in Power BI, the thing about Power BI is that you can connect to many data sources. Let me show you. First of all, let me open the Power BI instance. So it'll be here, Power BI desktop. All you need to do is click on that. Yeah. And once this is open, just click on blank report. And the way to get the data in Power BI Desktop, it's quite simple. Just click on, in the Home tab, there is a option to get data here. Just click on the Get Data, and you see how many data sources you can connect to here. And if you think that your data source is not available in these options, then you can click on More. Okay, and here you see there are more than 100 data sources which you can connect via Power BI. Okay, so all these things: SQL Server, Oracle DB, Azure Synapse Data Lake, GitHub, okay, IBM data source, everything you can connect to. Okay, and that is one of the added advantages of using Power BI Desktop. And it has connection with many data sources. Okay, so this is how we usually do it. So you can connect to many data sources, let's say CSV flat files, Excel sheets, SQL Server DB, SharePoint folder, Access database, and sometimes even websites as well. Okay, so let's start connecting to data source ourselves, and let's start getting the data. Okay, let's look into how to get the data into Power BI first. Okay, so what I'll do first, let us bring some CSV file, then let's bring the SQL. I mean, let's bring the Excel file, and then we'll also look into how to get the data from some database. Let's say, for example, SQL Server. Okay, and remember, to bring the data from any database, you need to have that database installed in your system. For example, if you want the data from SQL Server should be installed in your system. If you want to bring data from MySQL needs to be installed and running in your system. Same is the case with IBM DB or Oracle DB, wherever you want to bring it from. Okay. So first, let's try to bring a simple CSV flat file. Okay. So I'll go to Get Data, and I'll click on text bar CSV. Now, text bar CSV in the sense comma separated values. Okay, CSV files. I'll click on that, and in my folder, I need to click on, I need to give it the path where that CSV file is present. Now, if you see, I have many CSV files here. Let's say, for example, orders 2018. I'll just click on that. I'll click on open. Okay. And once that is done, look, this new window appears. Okay. And here, this is the very important thing. Based on whether you think that this data is clean or this data needs to be clean in Power Query Editor, you can either select load or transform data. Let me explain. Let's say if you think that this data is clean already and there is no further transformation required, then you can directly load it into Power BI Desktop. And if you load it here, what happens? Let me show you. That data you will directly see in the Power BI Desktop. That is, it has been loaded, but it says it has some errors. We'll look into that. Okay, I'll close it, and here you see you can view the table here. Okay, and importantly, if you want to review the table as well, look into columns and rows, you can do that as well. Here you can see the table in the form of columns and rows. So this is the data. However, if you think that the data is not clean, it needs further transformation steps, then what you can do is, let me show you. Let me first delete it, and deleting is quite simple. In this pane, just go to the three dots beside the table and just click on uh, delete from model. That's it, and it will be deleted from your PBIX. Okay, so let me bring it back and let me show you one more option. I'll go to Get Data, again text bar CSV, same file, open, and this time I'm presuming that the data is not clean and it needs to be transformed. So what I need to do is I need to click on transform data, and it will take me to the Power Query editor. Okay, so let me do that. We click on transform data, and you see a new window will appear, and this window is not of the existing Power BI desktop. The existing Power BI desktop window is this. However, the new window that has been opened is again a part of Power BI desktop, but this is Power Query Editor. You can see it here. It's a Power Query Editor. It is in-house ETL tool of Power BI with some limited capabilities. It doesn't have the capabilities of the dedicated ETL tools like Informatica and Azure Data Factory. However, you can do some limited transformations in Power Query Editor as well whenever necessary. Okay, so this is what the Power Query Editor looks like. Now, we'll look into how to transform the data in Power Query Editor later. Right now, we are just looking into how to get the data in Power BI Desktop. Okay, so I'll just click on close. Okay, now this is how you get the data, that is the data from CSV or flat file. Okay, now let's look into how to bring the Excel sheet. Okay, so again, I'll click on Get Data. Okay, I'll go to Excel workbook here. Click on that, and then you see you need to go. Wherever your file you have stored in your computer, you need to click, or you need to basically give the path to that. Click on that particular file, click on open, and once that is done, it will give you the option to select among the pages that are available within that within that Excel workbook. If if the workbook only contains one page, it will show you that. If it contains multiple pages, it will have those options to select among those pages, or to select all of the pages here. Okay, and once you select one of the page, you will see the preview of this that particular table in here. Okay, and again, based on whether you want to directly load it into Power BI desktop, or maybe you want to go into Power Query editor to transform the data, you can select among loading and transforming the same. Right now what I'll do is I'll just load it into Power BI desktop. Okay, so that it appears here, you see. And if you want to have the preview of this table, you can definitely go to the table view. You can see the data by yourself in that form. Okay, any doubts till now, people, from anyone? Is it clear how to bring the data from flat files or CSV files and Excel workbook?
Yes.
Yes, sir, clear.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the next thing, and this thing is very important, since in almost 90 to 95% of the projects, the data that they bring from is usually a database. Okay, they might be using some SQL server, or maybe Denodo database, or maybe Snowflake, or Azure Synapse Lake. Whatever database they bring it from, the procedure to bring that data is similar to what I'm going to discuss now. So listen to this very carefully, because again, as I'm saying, 90% of the time the data will be brought from a database. Okay. Now let's say we are going to bring the data from database like SQL Server. So first thing to do is make sure that my SQL Server is running. Okay. So here, if you see, this is my SQL Server which is in running condition, and just to show you the databases which are present in this SQL Server, uh, you see, there are these databases. I have these two databases, that is AdventureWorks 2012 and AdventureWorks 2022. Okay. And within that, there are many tables. If I expand this, these are the tables within AdventureWorks 2012. Okay. And the same tables are there within AdventureWorks 2022 as well. Okay. You see this. These are the tables. Now let me just give you a preview of the table that we are going to bring here. Okay, so let's say, for example, I want to bring one particular fact table called as sales order detail. To get the preview of that, let's get the preview in SQL Server itself. I need to right click here, and I'll select, let's say, top 1000 rows. Okay, so yeah, this is how this table looks like. If you look at this, it has these many columns. It has sales order ID, sales order detail ID, carrier tracking number, order quantity, prod ID, and unit price, special offer ID, unit price discount, total, and many other details. So basically, if you think about it, it's the sales data. Okay, sales transaction data is what you can call it. Okay, now let's see how we can bring this from here in the database into Power BI. Okay, so let's look into that. So first thing first, you need to again go to get data, and then within that you need to click on this SQL server which is mentioned here. Click on SQL server, and then you need to mention two important things here. One is the server name, and second one is the database name. Now what is the server name? Let me show you what's the server name here. This thing, you see, when I'm hovering over this, can you see this desktop dash EU26J C1 SQL Express? Is this visible, people? This is your SQL server name. Okay. And what is the database name? The database name here is AdventureWorks 2012. Hope that is clear, people. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
So I'll enter both here. Okay. I have stored the same in here. So this is my server name. I'll just copy and I'll paste it here. Control C, Control V. And the database name, I'll enter Adventure Works 2012. That's it. You need to do this. And you see there are two options here. One is import mode and direct query mode. We'll talk about that later. Okay. But right now I'll just click on OK. Then you see the same tables which were visible underneath that SQL database in SQL Server, the same tables are appearing here as well. Let me show you that also. So these tables which were there under AdventureWorks 2012, the same are appearing here as well. So you can select the tables which you want to bring into Power BI desktop. So the table that I'm concerned with is this one, sales order detail. Let me select that. And you see, it gives you the preview of that particular table. You see, there are same columns which were available in the SQL Server here as well. Okay. So now what I'll do, I'll just simply click on load so that it gets loaded into Power BI desktop. Okay. And yeah, this is the new table. If you want to have a preview of that table, just need to click on the table view and click on that particular table so that this table is visible to you like this. Okay. Is this clear, people? How to bring the data from SQL Server?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Now, one more question. How many of you are aware of the query writing procedure or SQL queries? Has anyone learned SQL Server or SQL
Yes.
queries?
I
Yes, sir.
do.
So I hope you know why SQL queries are used. SQL queries are basically used to get the required data, okay, or maybe to alter the data, or maybe sometimes to create the table in the form of data as well. Okay. Now let's say in this table, okay, let's say we have this table. Okay, this table is in SQL. Okay, and you don't want the full data, you want some kind of filtered data. Okay, you want some kind of filtered data in Power BI. Okay, and for that, you know how the filtering works in SQL? You need to again write the query, right? By mentioning the where clause or having clause. Hope you guys are aware of that, people.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So the thing about Power BI desktop is that you can write SQL queries while importing the data into Power BI desktop as well. Okay, now let me show you that. First, let me tell you what's the ask. Okay, so let's say the ask here is that. Go here. Now you see the order quantity. Okay, here we have the order quantity column. Let's say the business end asks us only to retrieve the records where order quantity is greater than or equal to 5. Is the requirement clear in the first place, people? Yes or no? You need not bring this whole table, but the business and what they are telling you is only get the data where the order quantity is greater than or equal to 5. Is the requirement clear, people? It's simple.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So let's try doing that. Okay. So again, what I'll do is, so first of all, I'll delete this existing one. And then we'll go back to get data. Again, SQL Server. Then you need to mention the server name, then database name. And after that, in import mode, there's one more thing called as advanced options. In advanced option, here in the SQL statement, you can actually write the SQL queries. And when I say you can write SQL queries, there is no limitation to the number of lines you can write. You can write as big query as possible. You can even write the stored procedures here as well. There's no limitation of that kind here. So let me write a simple query where I'll filter the data based on order quantity. So what I'll write, select star from what's that? Sales dot sales order detail. Yeah, sales dot sales order detail. That's the table, and I'll mention the where condition where the column name is order QTY greater than or equal to what? 5. Then I'll just click on OK now. And now you see you have this data, and once I load this data, you'll see in the table view for yourself that we have the sales order detail table, but the main thing to be noted here is that the order quantity is greater than or equal to 5. Is this clear, people, what we have done here?
Yes.
Okay, so this is how, while getting the data into Power BI desktop from any database, you can write the SQL queries there as well. Okay, and the procedure is similar to bring the data from different databases as well. Let me just give you a glimpse of that. Let's say, for example, if you want to bring the data from some other database, like let me go to more, okay, and let's say if you want to bring the data from maybe Oracle DB, okay, so just need to click on connect, uh, and it asks you to install a third-party connector. And once you say yes, you just need to mention the server name here. That's it, the Oracle DB, and you can connect to it. And again, here also you have the option to write the SQL server, SQL query, but it should be based on the syntax of Oracle DB. So there'll be some minor differences that you need to take care of. Okay, then let's say if you want to bring the data from MySQL, for instance, then again, you need to search it here, MySQL DB, connect, and again it says third party connector is required. Click on OK, and let me check again. I'm sure that because I have brought the data from MySQL database as well, additional components to be installed. But yeah, if we click on OK, it needs to be installed, but yeah, I'm sure that it just needs the server name and database name as well. That's it. You can just bring the data the way you brought from SQL Server or even Oracle. And let's say if you want to connect to some data lake, like maybe Synapse data lake, okay, or what is it? Azure Synapse, yeah, Synapse Analytics. So I'll just click on connect. And again, you need to write the server name, database name, and again, you can write the SQL query here as well. Okay. So this is how you bring the data into Power BI desktop, be it CSV or flat file or Excel sheet or maybe any other database you want to bring it from. Any doubt with respect to getting the data into Power BI desktop, people? Yes.
No.
No, sir.
Okay.
I have a doubt.
Yes, please.
Suppose we have 100 records from SQL Server and 100 records from CSV file, same data, in the same column. That
Your
is that
voice is
possible?
a bit low. You're saying you have 100 records from SQL Server and 100 records
Yes, from CSV file.
from CSV file. Okay. Mhm.
And we have the same set of columns.
Got it? Uh-huh.
Yeah, is it possible here?
You can bring them as two different tables and you can do appending in Power BI. Hope you are
Okay,
aware of the
okay.
append function,
Yes, yes.
union function, right?
Yeah,
Append function is
yes.
similar to union in
Union,
SQL.
right.
So appending can be done within Power BI desktop. That can be done, sure.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So now that we are thorough with bringing the data into Power BI desktop, let's move on to the next part. That is uh, understanding the different modes in which the data can be stored in Power BI. And this is very important question as far as interview is concerned, because they will most of the time ask you one simple question, that is what's the difference between import mode and direct query mode. So let's try understanding the difference between the two. Okay. Now, let's say when we are bringing the data from in import mode. Okay, let's talk about import storage mode. The thing about this is in import mode, the data is actually brought into this PBIX or in Power BI desktop itself. And usually what happens, let me just open the sheets. We'll talk about import mode first. Okay, so in import mode, the data actually comes into Power BI. Okay, let's say, for example, you're bringing the data from SQL Server. Okay, the original source is SQL Server here. Okay, let's say we are bringing one table from SQL Server into Power BI Desktop, and we are using import mode. Okay, then what it means is that table, let's call it table 1. Okay, it is coming into PBI as well, means it is consuming memory while being in Power BI desktop as well. It means you're copying from here, you're pasting it into Power BI desktop. That's what import storage means. Is the first point clear, people?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, one more thing need to be understood in import mode is that the import mode makes use of one engine in Power BI, which is called as Vertipack compressor engine. Now, what does this engine does? What it does is when you get the data from some database into Power BI in import mode, it basically compresses the data and then stores the data into Power BI. It compresses the data to a certain extent and then stores into Power BI. And when I say compress, it doesn't mean that it eliminates certain rows or columns. No, that's not what it does. It extracts all the data, but it compresses its memory. Let's say, for example, the size of this data, table 1, is somewhere around 1 GB. When it comes into Power BI, it will reduce to certain extent. And what accomplishes that? This engine, Vertipack compressor engine, it reduces the memory size of this one. Okay, so this is the basic definition or the basic working of import mode. Is that clear, people? Anyone has
Yes.
any doubt? Okay, and one more important thing. I hope you all are aware of what is meant by refresh or data refresh.
Yes.
What happens in the data refresh? Anyone, people?
It brings in the new data, any new changes that has occurred within the data.
Correct. Let's say you brought table 1 from SQL Server to Power BI Desktop in import mode, and let's say you click on data refresh. Then what happens? This table 1 gets reloaded from SQL Server to Power BI Desktop again. And let's say when it's in the backend, I mean, in SQL, some new records are added. Those new records also get added in table 1 while refreshing. Is it clear, people?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one thing to be noted here is that until and unless you click on refresh button here while being in import mode, the changes that happen in backend will not be reflected in front end. Is it clear, people, what I'm talking about?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
If
Okay.
you have added new columns or
Uh-huh.
remove some columns, then in that case it will also refresh.
No, only if you press the refresh button, then it will reflect. However, if you don't refresh the data, this will still be showing the old data which you brought from here. Clear?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is the important thing that needs to be understood regarding the import mode. Now let's talk about direct query mode. Okay. Now let's say for direct query, we have Power BI instance here. And again, we are bringing the data from SQL Server in direct query mode, of course. And then there is table one, which needs to be brought here. Now, the thing about direct query is that table one is not copied and pasted into Power BI desktop. It is not stored into Power BI desktop. All we do here is establish the connection with the backend. Okay. The data will still be coming from the backend itself, or data will be stored in the backend itself. And the backend here is SQL Server. What you see here is just a view of that data. That data is not actually copied and pasted here. You just see the view of that data and you just have the connection with the backend here. This is what happens in direct query. Okay. And obviously, since the data is not coming or stored into Power BI desktop, there is no question of multi-pack compressor engine here. And one more important thing, whenever the refresh happens in the backend, the same is reflected here as well, because what we see here is just a view of the actual data which is present in the backend. So whether you press the refresh button or not, it doesn't matter. Whenever the data changes in the backend, the same is visible in the front end as well. Is this clear, people? The inherent difference between import mode and direct query mode, is it clear?
Yes. But which one is better?
That we'll discuss. Each has its own advantages and disadvantages. That we'll discuss in detail. But the main difference, is it clear or not?
Yes, it is. What is this
Um,
mashup engine?
Come again?
Mashup engine?
I
What
mean,
is it?
mashup engine, I mean, it's not mashup engine, it's mashup language. It's a code
Okay.
based on which Power Query editor works. And we'll look into that while doing the transformations in Power Query editor.
Okay.
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 Yeah. Anyone else
Hello.
was asking some
Uh,
question?
yes. Yes. In this direct query mode, if we have some added new columns or new
Hmm,
rows, that will
hmm.
be refreshed.
Yes. I mean, you need not even press the refresh button. If you delete some rows or add some new columns or do whatever transformation in the back end, it will be visible in the front end. Clear? Okay. So now let's look into detail. What are the options or pros or advantages or cons of each and every mode? Both these modes, import mode and direct query mode. Okay. So the first thing here is that in import mode currently, okay, if you have, and yes, let me talk about that as well. I mean, we'll talk about licensing later, but for now, you remember that there are three types of Power BI licenses. One is free license, then comes pro license, then comes premium license. And within premium license also, there are two types. One is premium per user, and then there is premium per capacity. But the thing here, people, is that in free license, you can bring 1 GB of data. Here also, you can bring 1 GB of data into Power BI Desktop. In premium per user, based on your application, you can bring 10 GB, or if you opt for higher data set or higher memory size data set, you can even bring the data up to 100 GB data size. Okay, 100 GB memory. It means in one PBI desktop file, you can bring this much amount of data which is mentioned here. Okay, is this clear, people?
Yes.
Now, let's go back here. So the thing is that if you are in import mode, there is a limitation of data that can be brought into Power BI, okay, which is mentioned here. But usually when you're working in any organization, they usually will be having the premium workspace, which means you can bring the data up to 10 GB or even up to 100 GB. But practically speaking, in one PBIX, if you bring 100 GB of the data, then to handle this PBIX itself, you need a computer or laptop which has the RAM of around maybe 128 GB. Okay, so practically speaking, in any organization, you bring the data. I mean, if let's say the data set size is high, it means you are using data of memory of around, let's say, 2 GB or 3 GB. It usually doesn't go beyond that, but if it even if it goes, it will be within 10 GB. Okay, no matter if it has 50 million or 60 million records as well, it usually is under 10 GB. Okay, and this is, I mean, uh, as far as I've worked or I've seen, usually it is within 10 GB. Okay, so this is one of the limitation, memory size limitation when we work in import mode. Whereas if you work in direct query mode, there is no such limitation. Okay, you can bring, I mean, you need not bring, because the date, all you do is just establish the connection to the backend. So no matter how much data is in the backend, you can show that in Power BI desktop as well. Okay, so there's no such limitation. But you might think that this is one of the biggest advantages of using direct query mode. But let me tell you, in projects, 90 to 95% of the time, they usually end up using import mode itself. And the reason is next few points, which I'm going to mention. Okay, so here, the next important thing, in import mode, you can get the data from multiple sources. Like let's say one table might come from SQL Server, another table might come from maybe Snowflake, and another table might be CSV or flat file, stuff like that. Whereas when you're working in direct query, the data should come from one single source. So that is one of the biggest disadvantage of direct query. Next thing, performance. Performance in import mode will definitely be higher, because in import mode, actually the data is in Power BI desktop. So whenever you want to access the data, you are just accessing the data which is already in Power BI desktop, and it won't take much time. Whereas if you are in direct query mode, when it is about accessing the data, you're actually accessing the data which is in SQL Server. And let's say at one point of time, many people are connected to one single server, then it definitely will take more time for data to be shown in your dashboard, because the traffic for the server might be more, and sometimes the server might get slow. All these things will be impacting your Power BI dashboard, and hence that is also one of the biggest disadvantages. Okay, so next, this thing which I mean, this I have already mentioned. What is that? Any underlying changes in the data. Okay, let's talk about import mode first. If there are any underlying changes in the data from the backend, the same will not be reflected in Power BI until and unless you press the refresh button. Whereas if you're working in direct query, any underlying changes in the data in the backend will immediately be reflected in Power BI desktop as well. Okay. Now, there are two more important differences. One is actually three. One is data preview or maybe review. And then there is usage of PQ editor, that is Power Query editor. And then there is usage of DAX. Okay. Now let's talk about data preview. Okay. Now you see here in this case, I have brought this table from SQL Server. And if you remember, did I bring it in import mode or direct query mode? Anyone remembers?
Imports mode.
Import mode.
Okay. Now let me show you what happens if I bring it in direct query mode. Let me open one more Power BI desktop instance. Now I'll use the blank report and then let's get the same table from SQL Server, and I'll mention the server name and database name. That's the server name, and the database name is Adventure Works 2012. And here what I'll do, I'll use the direct query mode. Okay, and let me get the same table. This time I'm not going to write the query, although you can write the query. Okay, I'll just get one particular table. So I'll try getting the same table, sales order detail. That is this. And I'll load it into Power BI Desktop. Yeah. Now, you see here, in this view and in the other Power BI instance, we have one primary difference. What is that? Can you tell me? Can anyone tell me? Here we brought the data from import mode, and here we brought the data in direct query mode. What is the main difference that you're seeing? Anyone?
No table view.
No table view. Here, if you see, in direct query mode, there is only report view and model view. But there is no way for you to look into actual columns and rows while you're working in direct query mode. Whereas if you're working in import mode, you have this table view where you can actually preview the data or review the data which is coming from the backend. So this is one of the important things, people. Is it understood, this difference?
Yes.
Okay. Now coming to next thing, Power Query Editor. When you are in import mode, you can make use of 100% capability of Power Query Editor. Okay. And when you are in import mode, you can make use of 100% capability of DAX as well. Whereas if you are in direct query mode, the capability of Power Query Editor or the capability of transformations, the usage of transformations will be limited. Some of the functions you cannot use, and same applies to DAX as well. The DAX usage will be limited in terms of the functionalities that can be used. Okay. Importantly, you cannot use time intelligence functions if you're working in direct query. Okay. So this is one of the very important differences, because if let's say the usage of DAX is limited, it means that it kind of mm, limits your ability to make your dashboard more dynamic or more customized, because DAX, I'll tell you, is very, very, very important as far as customizing your dashboard or doing the in-depth analysis of the data. And if this is limited, then it's a big disadvantage of using the direct query. So to be frank, usually the best thing to do is use the import mode itself. Okay. Although Microsoft in their own website, what they suggest is if your data size is huge, you go for direct query. But practically speaking, if you go for direct query, it kind of limits your ability to use Power BI. Okay. So most of the times people will go for import mode itself. Is that clear, people?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there is one more thing called as, I mean, two more things to be frank. One is live connection, and next one is dual mode or composite mode or even hybrid mode. Okay. Now let's talk about live connection. Live connection is very similar to direct query, apart from the fact that the data in live connection will be coming in cube form. Okay, that's the only difference. Live connection is direct query itself. However, the data here will be coming in the cube form. Now, are you guys aware of the data in the cube form? Anyone?
No.
No.
No. Let me just show you, or let me just give you a preview of what the cube form data looks like. I'll have to go ahead of myself, but let's do that. So yeah, look, now if you look into this particular data, it mainly has three entities. Okay, here on this z-axis, let's call this z-axis, what you have here is the timeline. Okay, timeline in the sense 2025 Jan, 2015 Jan, 2015 February, 2015 March, and so on. What you have in y-axis is actually the dimension called as product and product types here. The product might be component, the product might be clothing, the product might be bikes, the product might be accessories. And what you have in x-axis are the measures. The measures may be, let's say, for example, here the measure is sales amount. Here, let's say the measure is cost. Here, let's say the measure is sales quantity. Here, let's say the measure is return quantity, etc. Okay. Now, in that case, let's say this measure is sales amount. Then what this cube represents? Anyone? Yes, people. If here the measure is, or the fact is sales amount, then what does this cube represent?
Says amounts of components.
Sales amount of component that happened in what?
January 20.
2015 January. Similarly, let's say this this is return quantities. Okay, let's say this is return quantities. Then what does this cube represent?
Return quantity of bikes in January.
Yes. Okay, so this is how the cube form of data looks like. Okay, and to be frank, the cube form of data usually comes from the tools or the backend tools like Azure. It's called Databricks, and it usually comes from the tools like Azure Data Factory, and sometimes even Synapse Lake, and sometimes it even comes from one more Microsoft tool like the SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services. Okay, but yeah, just to give you a glimpse of that.
So
The cube,
so
yeah.
so is it right to say that cube form of data always have three components? Is that
Yes,
the right way to put it?
that's correct. It has
Okay.
three dimensions, or basically it looks
Three
like a 3D
dimensions.
form of data. Okay,
Okay.
that's how it is. And I'll just, I can give you the glimpse of that in Power BI as well. There's one visualization called as matrix, which stores the data in a cube form. But yeah, let's look into that later, because we'll be again going far ahead of ourselves. Okay, but right now you remember in live connection, the data comes from uh, the tools which provide the data in the cube form. Okay. Now about this dual mode or composite mode or hybrid mode, what is this? In the dual mode or composite mode or hybrid mode, some of the tables might be coming in import mode, and some tables might be coming in direct query mode. So the combination of these two in one PBIX leads to that being called dual mode or composite mode or hybrid mode. Is that clear, people?
Yes, but in that connection,
Mhm.
I don't see the option for live connection and dual mode in the
Come again?
data source from on the desktop, on the Power BI desktop in the data source. I don't see these last two options.
Yeah, let me show you. Okay. Okay, we are talking about this. Here,
Yes. Mhm.
now we have an option called as semantic model, Power BI semantic model. And if I click on semantic model, let me show you. Now let's say if I select any semantic model. Now these are the data sources which are stored as, let's say, cube forms. If I click on them, if I connect, see, direct query isn't available because, okay, I'm already working on this thing, this SQL server. So I'll have to open one more thing because here, let me show that to you. Power BI desktop again. Let me show you how the live connection works. So here, get data again, then Power BI semantic models, and then provided if I have such files in my workspace, then I can definitely bring that, connect, and just wait for it. Now you see what I have is the data in the live connection form. Again, in live connection, again, you cannot see the table preview. Can you? No. This is the live data which is coming from the Power BI workspace. However, you can see many tables in here. And some of these tables are kind of consolidated tables as well. So everything that is stored in that particular data set in cube form will come here. Okay. So this is how we connect to live data. Okay? And here, let me show you one second. If I go to options and data source settings, so this is the live connection we have. Okay. Is this clear, people? Okay. So yeah, any doubt with respect to what was covered today? Importing the data from different sources and mainly the difference between direct query, import mode, and live connection.
If you go to the slide where it says the difference.
This one?
Yes. Go back. Yes. So it says for the import mode up to 10 GB per data set.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it? What is this data set is referring to?
Let me show you. Okay. So here, let's say we have brought this table, right? We have brought this table in the import mode. Okay. And the size of the data which you can store in Power one PBX file. This is one PBX file. Okay. This file which I'm opening, this is one PBI desktop file. So
Okay.
the amount of data that this file can contain is 10 GB. Clear?
So data set is just referring to one PBX file.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Any other doubts, people? Okay, fine. Then let's close the session here. And from tomorrow onwards, we'll start using the Power Query editor, and we'll bring some CSV flat files or Excel files, and we'll start doing the transformations within Power Query editor itself. Okay, so that is what we'll start from tomorrow. Yeah. Let me stop sharing my screen and let me stop the recording.